What's up, people? This is Gaetan Dofanzo. I'm with uh, two guests, and not the least. And then I think you've known. I'm gonna introduce them shortly. First, we have Maurice Carney, co-founder of Friends of the Congo, and also our executive director. And he'll be joined by Tariq Raouf. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, and
Yeah.
who is a Palestinian writer and freelancer journalist, and he used to work for Apple, and Apple has been able eyes recently, and he used to work for Apple, and then was recently fired because of his activism, because of how outspoken he has been for the Palestinian cause. And thank you for being willing to join us on Friends of the Congo platform and to discuss this important conversation, Brother Maurice as well as always. Um, uh, yeah. So how you doing?
Yeah.
But I'm gonna
Yeah.
pass the mic to Brother Maurice. How are you?
Good, man. I'm good. It's good to be having this discussion. The organization's been getting a lot of questions from different corners about this boycott Apple campaign. So we wanted to chime in. This is not the first go around in this type of questioning around Apple. About maybe about mm, 13 years ago, there's a lot of activity, people demonstrating in front of Apple stores. This occurred after the passing of the Dodd-Frank Act in the U.S. Congress, 2010 or so, I believe. And there was a provision in Dodd-Frank Act, conflict minerals provision, that called on tech companies to basically declare to the Securities and Exchange Commission their uh, supply chain, how they're sourcing their minerals as a part of their disclosure to the SEC. And we saw people rise up and made demonstrate in front of Apple stores and a number of other tech companies. So this is like, as Rodney Dangerfield would say, deja vu all over again. So really
History
interesting.
does repeat itself.
I was interested to really get into this discussion and really address uh, add some clarity, I think some foundational clarity that is missing and needs to be injected in the discussion. So I'm looking forward to that grounding.
Awesome, Brother Terry. And you have been really active for what, several months now, and what prompted you to join the fight, join the movement, and organize? What's your story?
Oh gosh. I mean, I spent most of my life kind of avoiding my heritage, hating everything about Palestine. And, after my grandma passed away and I went to the funeral, it like was a reawakening seeing these old faces that I barely recognized because I refused to be associated with my culture. And so I embraced my heritage, and after embracing my heritage and really realizing that, like, man, like I really want to fight for my people, that's really when it hit me that I belong in this fight. And over the last few years, I've found that I have a gift with words, that have found my voice in writing. And so I've been wanting to use that gift and try and write my way into this movement, because I firmly believe that, like, not enough people understand, and if you can just explain things in the right way, if you could just get people to understand exactly what's happening in a way that is digestible, that makes it less scary, less intimidating, then people are more inclined to join your fight.
Mm. And talking about fight recently, and because we're talking about Apple, right? And then I mentioned in the introduction that Apple fired you. Can you give us more details? Like what happened? Why would Apple, and I'm saying that because I've been following you for months, and you are a brilliant young man, and why would they fire you?
Well, thank you. They fired me because I broke a rule, and instead of giving me a slap on the wrist, I think it was because of my activism, how hard I was trying to fight them for their silence on Palestine, that they were looking for an excuse to get rid of me. It's absolutely wild that you can spend over 12 years of your life at a company, and they're willing to just kind of cut you off like that after like breaking a rule that they don't like, um, with no thought into the dedication or your work to that company.
No
And I think
warning,
one of the most, yeah, go ahead.
no warning, nothing.
No, I mean, like it was a. I broke a rule. The next day, HR called me. They're like, "Hey, did this happen?" I lied to them. I said, "No, it didn't happen." And then they caught me in that line. They're like, "All right, well, you're fired." Yeah. The worst part about it is that the reason they caught me in the lie is because I trusted someone. I trusted someone with what I was doing, telling them why I was doing it, and they reported me to HR. And that's the entire reason I got fired. It's because you trust the wrong people, and they will stab you in the back.
And what was the activism that you were doing that they forced them to, to like be like, "What we probably don't want Terry to be part of
It
us,"
was
like
it was talking to reporters about Apple's silence, about Apple's Zionism, about their racism, about their refusal to listen to our community, which I think our communities have in common, right? They knew that I was talking to reporters and filming content for a report, and they didn't like that.
yeah. So ever since the the media coverage and what's going on in Gaza and what's going on in the Congo with um with the cobalts and everything, and with the new launch of the iPhone, and I'm saying that because you were part of the organizers, right? Like trying to organize a protest, or actually organizing a protest, the Apple launch. Can you tell us more about what happened on Monday, why it was organized, and what's next before we kind of bring the international perspective into the conversation?
Yeah. Yeah, so I want to make sure I understood you correctly. You were cutting out, but you're asking basically like why we organized on Monday and why we decided to bring our groups together. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because Apple thinks that the way to address our communities is to just ignore us. They haven't really fully met us uh, in a space that matters. They haven't really addressed the concerns that we've been bringing to them. And so we got together, we protested outside of Apple Park during the keynote on Monday, to show them that ignoring us is not the way to go. I wanted to bring together our communities because we've both been hurt by Apple, explicitly, and we've been telling them that like this is hurting our communities, and you need to do something more than what you're doing. And they believe for some reason that they can just ignore things and things will pass and they'll get away with it and they don't have to be held accountable, which is one of the reasons why we named it the Apple Accountability Rally, and why we're doing that protest on the 20th as Apple Accountability Day. The whole point is to hold Apple accountable for their crimes and their racism and their part in our people's genocides and murders.
Mhm. Let me bring Brother Maurice into the conversation and talk about like how you didn't mention Tarek. Brother Maurice, Tarek just mentioned that Apple is has been involved into literally the suffering in both the Palestinian community and the Congolese community. Can you tell us more the Congolese perspective, like how Apple uh, is involved in what's going on in Congo, or if you can just like make it clear for the audience and the folks listening to us.
Yeah, Gaetan. It's kind of interesting because if you talk about Apple, right? You're basically talking about Apple as an example, right,
Mm,
of one of many, right? The challenges of the Congo and the situation of the Congo cannot be reduced to one company, right?
Mm.
And if you reduce it to one company, then you miss the entire uh, uh, complex of systems that have placed the Congolese people, the Congo, in the position that it's in today. The point of the discussion, really, or the departure of the discussion, should be the legacy of the colonial system, right? European powers designed Congo in 1884, 1885, the Berlin Conference, right, as an outpost for the extraction of natural resources to fuel, right, Western and global industries. This is a design, 1884 to 1885. And within a 23-year period of that design, right, where rubber and ivory were extracted from the Congo, it decimated the Congolese population by half. An estimated 10 million people perished. Now, that design, that blueprint is very much in effect today. It hasn't fundamentally changed. When the Congolese people rose up in 1960 to shatter that design, to disrupt that design by electing a prime minister that said, we want these resources, instead of their being used, right, for the benefit of Western powers, we want it to be used for the benefit of Congolese first and foremost, and for Africans. And when he did that, Patrice Emery Lumumba, the United States government, led by the Central Intelligence Agency, mounted the largest covert action in the world to maintain that system, that exploitative system, that extractive system that Lumumba and his comrades were trying to smash, right? And this is what declassified documents from the United States government itself says, not from Friends of the Congo. So the central problem, right? The central problem that produces the conflict that we see, that produces the children at the bottom of the mines, is a colonial system that has been in place since 1884, 1885, right? Now, Apple, Samsung, Tesla, Microsoft, Google, Glencore, China Molybdenum, you name it, right? They're all participating in this system where today you have a situation, you have an Israeli billionaire in Dan Gertler, has access to minerals in the Congo, in this capitalist system, in this colonialist system, in this imperialist system, where he can make $200,000 plus per day in royalties. Meanwhile, of the 110 million Congolese, 70 million live on less than $2.15 a day. So if we do not frame this in the proper context, people will think, well, okay, we boycott Apple, that's going to solve the problem in the Congo, right? Even if the Congolese were to take the BDS movement, I think started in 2005 by the Palestinians, right? It started to address the Israeli state, the apartheid state, the occupying state, right? Because of what the crimes they were committing against the Palestinian people. If the Congolese were to follow in that model and do a boycott, divestment, sanctions, they would actually be focusing on the Rwandan state that's been backed by the US, the UK, the European Union, who have waged a war of aggression against the Congolese people for the past 25 plus years, right? That has triggered the deadliest conflict in the world since World War II, where an estimated 6 million Congolese have perished, contained primarily in the east of the Congo, where incidentally, there's no cobalt being produced in the east of the Congo, right? Cobalt is produced in the south of the Congo, which brings its own set of challenges, both in the artisanal mining sector and in the industrial mining sector, right? So for us, we want to take this opportunity where people are hyped around Apple to provide a framing, a context, so that we can mobilize folks to take action that's going to lead towards an ultimate solution. And when it comes to Congo's resources, right, the ultimate solution is resource sovereignty for the Congolese people to control their land, control their resources, control their wealth, and control their own affairs. But because they're set up in a colonial system that has neo-colonial leaders in place, compradors, meaning the elites of the Congo, who work in cahoots with international finance capital, which includes companies and multilateral institutions and foreign governments, right? They provide unfettered access to mining companies, to Congo's riches, while displacing the Congolese people from their land, right? So we have to look at and understand these forces. And when you understand these forces, you'll understand that the call for a boycott, which may be fine, it's commendable. One could boycott Apple, but if you're boycotting Apple because you think you're going to stop the conflict in the Congo, you're dead wrong. It is not going to happen. In fact, it may produce the opposite result. It may fuel conflict in the Congo, right? Because I shared with you, well, that's one thing. But if you're going to boycott Apple on behalf of the Congolese, the first thing that you ought to do, is consult with the Congolese. Not just any Congolese, right? But those Congolese that are digging up the cobalt. What do they say? What are their prescriptions? What are they calling for? Those that are in the bottom of the pits in Kolwezi, what are the artisanal miners, the small-scale miners saying? And you consult with them. You engage them. You don't erase them and say, hey, I'm going to call a boycott, and they're not even aware that you're calling a boycott on their behalf. When you're arguing for this boycott because you say you want to relieve their suffering, you want to relieve their pain, and you want to help them. But if you want to help them, have you spoken to them? Right? That's why we were there this summer, and we've been there talking to the diggers, right? In fact, we're producing a film on Congo's cobalt diggers that's going to come out in a few weeks as a part of a Congo week. So what we're saying is, at least one of the first things we're saying is, let's get the proper context of what's happening in the Congo, why Congo is being plundered, how it's being plundered, what's the history of it, and how, and the difference between tactics, strategies, principles, right? Tactically, Apple is a great target because it's a big company, probably the richest company in the world, $55 billion in cash, $1 trillion company. But if you think that boycotting Apple is going to solve any problem in the Congo, then you really, I'd say people haven't done the necessary study, to understand the core challenges of the Congo, what's at stake, the forces working against the Congolese people, and the difference, right, between the causes and the symptoms. Apple is a symptom of the capitalist, imperialist, colonial system that's in the Congo, but it's not a cause. It's not a cause of it. That means that you can hold for Apple. You can just take Apple out of the equation, right? You can hold for Apple, and then all those forces that you see unfolding in the Congo, the child labor, the deaths, the rapes, they will still continue. That's because the problem is structural and systemic. So for us at Friends of the Congo, we want to take this opportunity, use it as a teachable moment in terms of what the core challenges are, what the systemic challenges are, what the structural impediments are, and how we can mobilize people to address them.
It's just like one part of the problem, really.
Yeah. And since Tarek, you talking, when you mentioned Dan Garrett last, so you smiling. I don't know if you had something specific in mind when
he mentioned what?
Dan Garrett, the billionaire Dan Garrett.
Oh, well, I didn't realize that, of course, one of the main people that's financing the horrors in Congo is Israeli. Like, it just, like, I smiled because it's just like, of course, colonialism, it's a shared problem. That's why I was smiling. Yeah.
And in terms of the demonstration that happened on Monday, and then there was also one scheduled on September 20th. Tariq, what are the demands on the pro-Palestinian side? What are they really concretely asking Apple to do? And then I'm going to turn to Maurice Carney for when it comes to Friends of the Congo. Brother Tariq?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing would be to acknowledge our community suffering, right? I just want to speak to, but before I go into all the demands, I want to speak to what Brother Maurice was saying. In that it was a very enlightening conversation. Because really, what it comes down to is you really have to listen to what the diggers are saying, or what the people that are most affected by this conflict are saying, and what they need. And in the way that I see it is the conversation happening about Apple and Cobalt. The conversation about Cobalt and iPhones is just an entry level conversation into the whole subject, because once you really start realizing and start digging into all the depths and how far this goes and how complicit this is and how this is an imperialistic colonialistic problem, that's really when people start to get activated to realize how complicit almost everything around them is in the same system that's killing the Congolese and the Palestinians and the Sudan and people in Sudan everywhere, and so like I first want to say that introduction and that all that information that you just shared was brilliant. So thank you for sharing that. And the reason that I wanted to work together with the Congolese people during this rally, during these protests, is because I want to show the world just how complicit Apple is as a company in these systems, in these colonialist systems, the imperialistic systems that have prevented any real work from being done to free these people by any means. And so when we talk about demands, acknowledging suffering is the most basic, easiest, simplistic thing that they can do, that would put the conversation on a global scale. In terms of Palestinian suffering, they've just refused to acknowledge any Palestinian suffering. In terms of what's happening in Congo, the only place that they are even talking about these things are in their conflict reports. And in their conflict reports, they say, "Oh, we've been trying to like their first conflict report, I think, was like 2004 or so, and they're like, we are working hard to work with third parties to make sure that our minerals are conflict free, right?" And then the Geneva Center for Human Rights, that study laid out how every corporation that claims to work with conflict-free minerals are just avoiding the awful truth that there is no such thing as conflict-free minerals, right? There is no way for you to verify that the cobalt that you're getting is conflict-free. So the demand, first and foremost, is just acknowledging the suffering, acknowledging the power that you have and the responsibility that you have to work with these communities. You're like this judge throughout this case and saying, "Oh, Apple has no control of these suppliers." I call BS, because you have every right and every duty to make sure that the suppliers that you're working with are actually legitimately doing this in a way that isn't harming people. And if you're going to be mining cobalt, you have to be able to make sure that like you have to be more responsible than that in my eyes. And so like the demand first and foremost is acknowledging. And I have to like get the list of demands because I have the list. But like honestly, the biggest thing is getting the conversation on the table in the way that like really shows us that you actually care about humanity.
Yeah. And while you gather that list of demands, I'm gonna get back to you, brother Maurice, because I think what Tariq said was really beautiful, well put, in the sense that the most basic thing that Apple could do, well, not just Apple. You talk about Apple as a symbol, like it could be Samsung, it could be Intel, is to acknowledge, right, the suffering, and to acknowledge how they have somehow participated into the oppression of folks, Congolese folks in the Congo, participating in the oppression of folks in Palestine. In the case of the Congo, I remember, because I actually volunteered and helped kind of like spread the word about the case, and Tarek did mention that, about the lawsuits that involve Apple. Can you tell us more about that lawsuit? What that lawsuit was, who it was targeting, on behalf of who, and what was the result of it? That's my first question. The second question: how do you then force tech companies like Apple to come to the table and somehow not just acknowledging as a basic, but also actively work to better the condition of the folks, to actually, be active and to seriously bring justice for folks either in Palestine or Congo? These are the two questions that I have for you.
Sure. Thanks, Gaetan, for the question. The lawsuit was brought by attorney Terry Collinsworth of International Rights Advocates right here in DC, against 5 tech companies brought against Apple, Tesla, Microsoft, Google, and Dell. And the case was brought on behalf of 16 Congolese children and their families. And the essence of the case was that Apple was sourcing minerals from the Congo that included or involved child labor. And these children that were in the mines, some of them died and others were injured. And Attorney Collingsworth followed the procedure that I think is so very much on point. He consulted with the aggrieved parties, and it was Attorney Collingsworth in concert with those children who were in the mines and their families that brought the suit against these tech companies. The suit was kicked out of the courts in I think it was 2021. It was kicked out. He said, or no, it had to be 2020, or either 2020 or 2021. And Attorney Collingsworth said it was kicked out by a Trump judge, Trump-appointed judge. And so he appealed, brought it back to the courts. He was granted a hearing again in December of 2022. This is in the DC Court of Appeals. And from December 2022, he had been waiting for a decision to come down. And while he was waiting, he said, we sat down and talked about possible strategies, and he felt that we needed to put some street heat pressure. One, let people know that there's a suit that's being brought against Apple and the other companies. Two, for us to mobilize, to send in letters, send in postcards, make phone calls, just apply pressure to them. Of course, we're consumers of their products, and make certain demands. The key demand at the time was for the companies to settle the case, right? Just settle it with Attorney Collingsworth and the children of the Congo. Restore the damage that had been done, personal damage to those children who were injured, and of course to the families of the children who had perished, who had died, and also restore the community, the environment that had been damaged. Right, that was the request that was made on the part of that we came up with Attorney Collingsworth. In addition to that, use the largesse of Apple and Tesla and Microsoft and Dell and Google to meet some of the demands that were coming from the artisanal mining sector of the Congo. The study that Tariq referenced before, a major demand was the formalization of the sector, so that people didn't have to dig deep into holes to get access to the minerals. That it's a radioactive materials that they're dealing with, that they have protective gear, that they have equipment. And some people may be asking, well, why make those demands? Why not just shut it down altogether? Well, in an ideal world, we would just shut it down altogether, where people are not scrounging at the bottom of holes to get minerals out. But for all the reasons that I've laid out to you before, the type of system, the poverty that's been imposed on 100+ million people, they have to survive, and they find a way to survive. And it's for that reason that in the Congo itself, you have about 2 million artisanal miners, 2 million, right? And those 2 million artisanal miners are responsible for an addition for 5 times their number. So about 10 to 15 million or so Congolese, as horrible as it is, as destructive as it is, depend on the artisanal mining sector, the small scale mining sector, right? The bulk of whom get in because of necessity. But there's also a tradition of mining in the Congo, artisanal small scale mining, that goes back hundreds of years, right? Where it's a part of the craft, a part of the family tradition. So there's that aspect of it too. So that's why, for example, when the Dodd-Frank Act was passed in 2010, and that the amendment that was made to it, the conflict minerals amendment, which the conflict minerals really, we're just talking about, they call them the three T's in gold. We're talking about tin, talking about tantalum, we're talking about tungsten and gold. I remember at the time when the Friends of the Congo wasn't in support of it for a whole host of reasons, because we maintain that the issue is you can have a clean supply chain, but Congolese will still be in poverty, still won't control their resources, and still won't have resource sovereignty. But you'll be, you can breathe freely. You can say like, oh, I have a conflict-free supply chain. So in any case, we were talking to members of Congress at the time, and we're saying to them, okay, so you have these three T's in gold. So what about cobalt, right? Cobalt is not wasn't part of the conflict minerals law, right? So we're like, what about cobalt? Cobalt is being extracted from the Congo, and the members of Congress who were putting together the amendment said, well, we can't deal with that right now. We just have to deal with the three T's. And today we see people, cobalt is front and center, especially when we talk about the green energy transition and the clean energy, so-called clean energy industry. So in any case, those were the demands that were made by that Attorney Collingsworth asked us, the people, to accompany him with, right, in terms of putting pressure on these companies because they're like an Apple, they're susceptible to being shamed. They cater to consumers. They do all kinds of marketing. So if there is a bad pub, let's say, then that's a point of leverage by consumers to make the companies do right. In fact, we call it the Do Right campaign. We had tens of thousands of people who sent letters, signed petitions, sent postcards, called Apple, and I think we should still do that. Unfortunately, in March of this year, the ruling came down, and I wouldn't be surprised if the judges, the 3-panel judges, kind of accelerated things. They were dragging their feet for a while because pressure was coming from the streets, and they needed to just like shut this thing down. So they sided with the companies, right, and against the children of the Congo and the Congolese people. Now it's interesting. What the judges said that the case that was brought, the plaintiff had standing, right? That means it was a valid case that could be brought to the courts. However, the plaintiff, the attorney, didn't address the question of a venture, right? That it didn't deal with the matter that these companies that these companies were in a venture with the mining companies in the Congo who were actually at the bottom of the supply chain and exploiting the minerals. Now, the fact of the matter is one of the companies that is in the lawsuit, Tesla, was and is in a venture with the mining companies, right? With Glencore. Tesla has got a deal with Glencore to extract cobalt out of the Congo. However, because the case was filed, right, initiated before Tesla entered into the deal with Glencore, you couldn't retroactively bring Tesla in as the evidence saying, here, what you're talking about not being in a venture, this company is in a venture, right?
Yeah.
So that was the complexity of it. So when we talk about standing on the part of the suit, when we talk about companies being in a venture, it's all there. But because of the anachronistic factor, the chronology, they couldn't be used in the case. So Attorney Collingsworth has to go back to the drawing board and see where to start next. And he's in that process right now. We've been talking to him to see what what will be done next. But there is a case there. In the meantime, these children, right, and their families are left to languish. Our folks on the ground visited them just last week, right? Because what we had committed to do with Attorney Collingsworth was saying, Apple is not going to restore these folks. They're not going to do anything. So we're going to mobilize our community as Friends of the Congo. We know if we put a call out there to people who are saying that Apple wasn't doing right by these people, so we're going to at least do something, right? So we met with the families, the folks on the ground, really just last week. They've been trying to put it together because their identity is protected, of course. So it had to be done, quite privately, and we're going to make sure that they get something. We're going to reach out to folks here. We're going to make sure that those families get something. At the same time, we want to keep pressure on Apple to do the right thing by the families, do the right thing by the children, do the right thing by the communities. But not just Apple. There are 5 companies in the suit, and Attorney Collinsworth said there could have been way more companies in the suit, but for strategic reasons, those 5 companies were the best path to pursue in terms of bringing that suit against the tech and auto companies that were part of the supply chain. And at the same time, we're putting pressure on Glencore as well, the mining companies, because you can't jump over the mining companies and then go straight to Apple and be silent on the mining companies. So we had organized a demonstration in front of the Swiss embassy in May against Glencore. The reason why we targeted the Swiss embassy is because Glencore repatriates its profits to Switzerland, and the Swiss citizens benefit from the resources that Glencore exploit in the Congo and Zambia, and pay pennies on the dollars in taxes to the Congolese government, where the Congolese government in just about all of these deals, except for the Chinese deals, get only about 10, 15, 20% of the deal, where the rest is owned in this capitalist system. The prices are set outside of the Congo. The ownership goes primarily to the mining companies. And part of the reason it's like that, the mining laws in the Congo coming out of the conflict were written by the World Bank, right? Which is one of the forces operating against the Congolese people, these multilateral institutions like the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and its sister arm, the International Finance Corporation, who, interestingly enough, they've been vested in, they write the laws, and their sister corporations actually have investment in mines in the Congo. So that's where things have been, where things were with the suit, and the fact, and we're still very much on top of it. And once Attorney Collinsworth comes back with a going forward strategy, we certainly will be reaching out to people and engaging them. But in the meantime, we definitely should keep the pressure, not just on Apple, but if you're not going to buy an iPhone, don't buy a Tesla. You drive around DC, you cannot go down the street in DC without seeing a Tesla. And we know Tesla is in a venture for sure in the Congo with Glencore.
Yep. Yes. And the question, that will be the same question for Tariq. How do you then force Apple to the table to listen to Congolese people and actually actively work so that human rights are respected by the mining companies, by the smelters and stuff? How do you force Apple to the table to listen, Tariq? You on mute.
Wow. I've never done that before. I can't believe I've done that. All right. Sorry. In this system of capitalism, these companies really only ever listen to 2 things. It's their bottom line or their reputation. That's the only thing that they really care about, because if they really care about the money, the bottom line, they care about the impact and the money that they can make, and their reputation impacts their bottom line. It impacts the amount of money that they can make. So really, the way that I see it is you have to address these things. And so that's why I like that we're putting pressure on Apple, even if they are using 100% recycled cobalt in their batteries right now, right? Like, it literally just started happening this year. I don't even know if they've quite officially met that threshold. It doesn't matter, because the fact of the matter is they're not listening to the Congolese people. They're not listening to the Palestinian people. And so that's how you pressure them, is you get them to understand that their behaviors have consequences. Right now, their behaviors seem to not have any consequences. And so what we can do is, as a public people, is say, we won't stand for this. We won't buy your products. We won't give you more money, and we will show the world just how awful you are. I mean, if you just think about it, like on a moral perspective, on a personal perspective, right? The fact that like Apple hasn't helped these families at all, the fact that they aren't willing to just settle because they're the richest company in the world, right? They can fully afford to address these needs and these concerns. And the fact that they're like, no, we can't. Like, the only way they're going to listen to people is if we take them to court or if we impact their bottom line and their image.
Yeah, yeah. And Brother Maurice, for you, how do you force Apple to listen to the Congolese people?
Yeah, you have to be strategic with it. The shame is one path. People are looking for different options. They say, "Well, I'm going to buy, another product." They may want to. They're looking at Fairphone, for example. Some people are looking at the Okapi, which is an interesting model that the Okapi phone. I think folks ought to take a look at because it speaks to the issue of retaining value locally. It's a Congolese phone that's developed by a Congolese scientist out of MIT. Phone, laptops, and
Professor Mbele,
solar
right?
panel. Professor Jean Bele, and gets the resources from the Congo and pays the workers a fair wage and produces a finished product. And he's done it to show that there's the old trope that Africans, they don't have the intellectual capacity to take their raw material from the ground to a finished product. And he's like, it's done, right? The Okapi phone, it's there, Congolese minerals, Congolese phone. So the shame shaming is important, of course, and then of course making other options. But I will say this with folks. There's another issue that's at stake here. We cannot absolve ourselves from this capitalist system. We engage in the conspicuous consumption, right? The Apple is got $55 billion in cash because they got it out of our pockets because we're getting the latest, the newest, best thing that we like. We may not necessarily need it. So I think as a part of the efforts also, we are to be engaging folks and educating them about maybe even down to the path of the degrowth movement, where the notion of consuming at all costs and feeding the beast can be put in check. I've shared with you, Gaetan, we've talked how struck I was by the speech that Gustavo Petro, president of Colombia, gave at the UN conference in 2022. Highly recommend people to check that out because he talks about how the consumption practices of U.S. citizens and those in the West, how that serves to destroy local communities. And he was referencing like the opioids, usage of cocaine, and how because of our excesses in the West, we wound up demonizing a plant, the cocoa plant in Colombia that's used for so many different things. So for our taking into not just in terms of like not getting the latest iPhone, but how are we practicing? How are we living? How are we feeding the beast by through this conspicuous consumption? That's a central component of the capitalist system that redound to the disadvantage of people in the Congo, Africa, and really the rest of the global South. So that's a responsibility that those of us who are living in the global North need to take on full force.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Tarek, the demands. We had a demonstration on Monday, and there was one also upcoming on September 20th. What are the demands? What are we demanding Apple to do in the wake of everything that we just said, right? Like the
Yeah.
crisis in Palestine, the ongoing genocide in Gaza, and also the crisis in the Congo.
Yeah. So our demands are acknowledge Palestinian suffering the same way Tim Cook acknowledged Israeli suffering the way he was able to write an email on October 9th. We want the same equal treatment, right? That's basic. Formally recognize the impact of cobalt mining on the Congolese people. And provide sufficient plans to help those affected in Congo. They need to really come to the table in a real meaningful way, in a public way that we can see that they're actually willing to help. And systemic suppression and retaliation against Palestinian employees and pro-Palestinian employees. They've been firing people for representing their pro-Palestinian nature at Apple stores. They've been banning keffiyehs, flags, things like that. So we want that to end. They shut down the Muslim at Apple Slack group on November 1st, not even a full month after the October war. They shut the Muslim Apple Slack channel down because Zionists and racists were coming in and harassing people. And instead of moderating the spaces, they decided to just close them. We want them to audit Israeli employees who served in the IDF to confirm that no Apple employee is complicit in committing war crimes. The fact of the matter is that when you work in Israel, you are mandatorily required to go and serve in the IDF. And while they're off serving in the IDF, Apple pays 100% of their base salary. So I want to make sure that none of Apple's actual money is being given to people while they're actually committing war crimes and killing children. We also want them to remove all far-right and religious organizations from Benevity, which is their donation matching program. It's explicitly against their own rules, saying that we don't allow religious organizations on this platform. However, there are countless religious organizations that want to reclaim the West Bank, essentially. They're arming and funding illegal settlements. And then one of the most important ones that I believe, and the last one, is remove war profiteers, Ronald D. Sugar and Susan L. Wagner from their board of directors. They are from Northrop Grumman and BlackRock. There is absolutely no need to have war profiteers on the board of directors for a tech company. Absolutely no need, especially for a tech company that believes in saving the earth and believes in social justice and equality. Having those people on your board of directors counteracts that entirely. So, like, those are our demands.
Yeah. Thank you. We've been talking for 47 minutes now. Maybe time for Brother Maurice and Tarek. We'll start with Maurice to kind of wrap up, conclusion, or anything that we should have said that we forgot, and any words, last word.
Go ahead, Tariq.
Tarek.
Sorry, Brother Maurice.
No, you got it. Go ahead.
What I'll end on is that this is all a shared struggle, right? One of the biggest reasons that I wanted to work with the Congolese people is because I really felt for their pain and the pain of people under this capitalistic, horrific imperialism that the West has really brought on to the global South, and so I want people to just recognize that it is not just about one people's struggle. It's not about one people's struggle over another people's struggle. You do not have to choose by fighting imperialism and by fighting capitalism and standing up for what you truly believe is right and for standing up for humanity over profits, period. You help us all. And so that is really what I want to come down to. It's not about one people or the other. It's really about fighting this together.
Thank you so much, Brother Maurice.
Beautiful. No, that's beautifully stated. Before we got on, I think we were talking about how we are in a moment of collective liberation, how Palestinian activists, in spite of the withering genocide that's being waged against them, we've created the space for Congo, for Sudan, for Haiti. So the message is for us to hold that space, because the global elites, they've shown how corrupt they are. They've shown how deceptive they are. They've shown how warmongering they are. They've shown how they see the average person, or the Palestinian, Congolese, Sudanese, Haitian, as disposable. So it's incumbent upon us through our education, through our awareness raising, through our mobilizing, to demonstrate that we value these lives. So in this moment where the focus is on Apple, I would encourage those who are rallying and mobilizing to use it as an opportunity to delve deeper, to take it to the next level, because whatever you do against Apple, it's not enough, and it's symptomatic. So for you to really join us in delving into what is it going to take for there to be a free Congo? What is it really going to take for there to be a free Sudan, a free Palestine, and enroll in that process? And we've provided a path for that. So we encourage people, go to freecongo.org, sign up with us, be a part of this global movement for a change in the heart of the African continent. Because really, when we talk about Congo, we're not just talking about Congo. We're talking about Africa. In the continent, if you look at it, if you liken it to a body, the African continent, the heart is the Congo, right? And it's Congo is the fulcrum on which the African continent swings. There is no new Africa. There is no free Africa. There is no liberated Africa. There is no sovereign Africa without a free, liberated, sovereign Congo. So it's central to the project of African liberation. So we encourage you, go to freecongo.org, sign up there to be a part, take action. We have 3 actions there that you can take immediately, and be a part of this movement for free, liberated, sovereign Congo and Africa.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks everyone to watch and listen to us live on Instagram and on X. And you heard Tariq, you heard Maurice. We really need a balanced approach for this collective liberation, really talking about Apple, talking about the boycott movements, talking about the genocides. Really, where does he leave us, right? Like, and Tariq said, well put, that these companies really won't come willingly to the table. We need to force them to come. We need to force them to listen. And the boycott campaign really is an effective tool to draw attention to the issue. Uh, but we need to be careful, like Maurice said, to avoid harming Congolese miners. And by doing that, how do we do that? We need to create, right, that boycott campaign needs to be really part of a broader strategy, and really including like a call for not just Apple, but also other companies to invest truly and in conflict-free mining initiatives in the Congo, to directly support for improving the working condition of the miners, and also really establish local processing plants and fair trade certifications, right? And I think Tariq, in your video recently, you kind of like said that Apple can well lead that initiatives. They have done that in the past. They can literally
Hmm.
bring all those tech companies at the table to really figure out how do we make sure that the minerals that are used to make iPhones, to make whatever gadget, or conflict free minerals. And then lastly, really ensuring that any withdrawal from unethical sources is accompanied by investment in the miners' communities. Brother Maurice said that we need to go and talk to the diggers themselves and their families. They exist. They have
Yes.
faces. They have names. We need to talk to them, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Gaetan, they're a collective of miners. They're in the tens of thousands, collective of
yeah,
miners. And I have to say, I know we're wrapping up, but one of the things about the collective of miners is that in the absence of the parastatal Jacqueline in the Congo that used to play a dominant role in employing people and providing support, you have collective of miners in the Congo that are providing, making sure that children don't get in the mines, making sure that pregnant women are not going into the mines, providing energy, provide in terms of electricity, building, uh, means for people to get access to electricity, providing healthcare, providing schooling for children. And our film that's coming out, we've sat down and talked to these miners, these collectives, and they're super organized. And I think people will be surprised to hear directly from them and what they have to say about the challenges that they face. And I mean, make no mistake about it, there is harsh conditions, but within that context, they've done remarkable work to protect and care for their community, to care for the women, to care for the children. And so you cannot have any campaign without sitting down and having those people at the bottom of that supply chain and talking to them, engaging them. When you come out and you say we're going to do A, B, C, and D, you have to be able to do it the same. Well, the collective miners of Mutoshi are signed on to this, right? The collective miners are, right here in the heart of Kolwezi have signed on, signed on to this. So that is really critical. Those voices must not be erased. You cannot just launch a campaign without any consultation whatsoever with those who are most and directly afflicted by the issues that you say you're addressing.
Yeah, yeah. So in conclusion, really, let's really continue to push for accountability, for transparency, and most importantly, justice. And justice not just for the sake of ethics and because it's a fancy word, but really because we're talking about human lives and the future of those, you know, uh, 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 who really needs either in Gaza and Palestine or in Congo and the Rubaya mine. So again, thank you so much, Tariq, brother Maurice. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you all for
Thank
watching,
you.
and stay tuned and follow Tariq, follow Friends of the Congo, and you're gonna hear back from us soon. Thank you.
All right. Thanks,
Thanks
Gaetan.
all.
Peace.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Tariq. Be well.
Yeah. Peace. You too.